Can you imagine living in an era where limits simply didn't exist? Where American brands built cars with giant engines, absurd amounts of power, and designs so wild they looked straight out of an action movie. Welcome to the 1970s, the last great era of classic muscle cars, where the roar of American V8 engines filled the streets and speed was practically a religion. And if you're a fan of 1970s muscle cars, the wildest engines, the most brutal stories, and the cars that defined an entire generation, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because this video is pure automotive dopamine. 1970 to 1972, Chevrolet Camaro, C28 350 LT1. When it comes to the perfect balance of sportiness, power, and handling, in the golden era of muscle cars, one name simply can't be left out: the Chevrolet Camaro Z28. This wasn't just another muscle car, it was Chevrolet's direct answer for drivers who didn't just want endless straight-line speed, but also wanted to take corners with a smile plastered on their face. In the early 70s, while most manufacturers were obsessed with stuffing in bigger engines and chasing absurd torque numbers, Chevrolet decided to go a different route. Instead of going bigger, they went smarter, refining engineering, shaving weight, improving balance, and dropping in a small but furious heart. The legendary 5.7-liter LT1 V8, capable of pushing out 360 horsepower with a screamingly high rev range for an American V8. This was an engine that didn't just push, it screamed, it breathed, and it begged you to rev it to the moon. This high-compression little demon allowed the Camaro to hit speeds around 130 to 135 miles per hour. But the real magic wasn't just top speed, it was how it got there. Agile, sharp, and precise. While other muscle cars felt like wild beasts, barely contained in corners, the Z28 LT1 felt planted, connected, razor-sharp. This was a driver's car, built for those who truly knew how to handle a machine. Aesthetically, this generation of the Camaro Z28 is simply flawless. Aggressive lines, a hood with functional air intakes, a sharp grille, widened fender flares, and those iconic racing stripes over the hood and trunk made it instantly recognizable. This car didn't need to scream for attention. Just sitting still, it told you it was ready to destroy anything in its path. A fun fact that not many know: the Z28 package was originally created to homologate the Camaro for the Trans Am series, where the rules capped displacement at 5.0 liters. But for the street versions, Chevrolet bumped it up to 5.7 liters, creating what was basically a race car with license plates. Between 1970 and 1972, tens of thousands were produced, but finding one in excellent condition today is getting harder and harder. On today's market, a pristine Camaro Z28 LT1 can fetch anywhere between $60,000 and $90,000. 1971 Plymouth Roadrunner. By the early 1970s, the Roadrunner had already built an almost mythical reputation. It was the car for rebels, for those who didn't care about paying extra for unnecessary luxuries, but wanted pure, raw, unfiltered power. And when Plymouth decided to offer it with the legendary 426 HEMI 7.0-liter engine, the beast was fully unleashed. This V8, officially rated at 425 horsepower, but easily pushing over 470 in reality, turned the Roadrunner into a steel missile capable of reaching speeds of 140 to 143 miles per hour. Absolutely wild numbers for a muscle car of its era. But the magic of the Roadrunner wasn't just in its top speed. It was in how it delivered that power. It was raw, rough, and visceral. The moment you turned the key, the engine didn't start. It exploded. The sound of the Hemi was a symphony of angry pistons, massive valves slamming open and shut like hammers, and giant carburetors gulping air like they were trying to empty the entire atmosphere. Aesthetically, the 1971 Roadrunner is one of the most polarizing and also one of the most desirable. With its aggressive front end, almost futuristic curved lines, and that iconic air grabber hood, which literally opened up to gulp more air when you floored it, this car was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a muscle car. It was a rolling declaration of war. And here's a fun fact, bordering on hilarious. Plymouth actually licensed the name and image of the famous Roadrunner cartoon from Looney Tunes. Every unit came with a little bird badge and even a horn that went beep beep. The perfect wink blending humor with mechanical aggression. Today, the 1971 Roadrunner 426 HEMI is an absolute collector's gem. Its rarity, due to very few being sold with the Hemi package because of its high price back then, makes it a car of pure desire. At auctions, it's not uncommon to see them go for $150,000 to $250,000, and some can even exceed $300,000 depending on condition, history, and originality. 1971 to 1974, AMC Javelin AMX 401. If there was ever a muscle car that came out of nowhere, like a surprise punch straight to the jaw of the big brands, it was the Javelin AMX. While Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge, and Pontiac were busy battling for street and track dominance, from a much smaller corner of the American auto industry, AMC, American Motors Corporation, decided it was time to prove they could build a beast that could go toe-to-toe with the heavyweights. And man, did they deliver! The Javelin AMX wasn't your typical muscle car, it was the rebel, the underdog, the one no one saw coming. AMC, known for their economical and family cars, got tired of sitting on the sidelines and unleashed this missile powered by a roaring 6.6-liter V8, pumping out 330 horsepower and enough torque to shove this thing forward like a runaway freight train. With this setup, the Javelin AMX could hit top speeds of 130 to 135 miles per hour, easily earning its seat at the table with the great muscle cars of the decade. But the most impressive part wasn't just the speed. It was the attitude. The Javelin AMX had a defiant personality. Its long lines, muscular rear end, integrated rear spoiler, and sharp front fascia with recessed headlights made it look aggressive, but in a way that was different, less flashy, and more focused on performance than show. And here's an incredible fact, one that very few people actually know. The AMC Javelin AMX didn't just shine on the streets, it also conquered the racetrack, winning the Trans Am Series Championship in 1971, beating out the likes of the Mustang, Camaro, and Challenger. That's right, the underdog didn't just show up, it won the battle in the corners, proving that AMC wasn't just playing around. They came to win. In today's market, a well-preserved Javelin AMX 401 can go for anywhere between $60,000 and $100,000, depending on condition and originality. And now I want to hear from you. Are you the type who sticks with the famous classics like the Mustang or Camaro? Or would you join the rebel side with a Javelin AMX 401? Let me know in the comments. Because while we all share the same passion, we each have our own style. Do you ride with the Giants or with the Rebel? 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 429. When you hear the name Mustang, you instantly think of power, freedom, and raw American rebellion. But within the legendary saga of the world's most famous pony car, there's one model that isn't just a Mustang. It's a purebred race machine, born from competition, a beast with racing pedigree and a presence that commands respect even when standing still. I'm talking about the Ford Mustang Boss 429, one of the most coveted and savage muscle cars to ever touch asphalt. This car wasn't built on a whim, and not even for the civilian market. Its existence was the result of NASCAR regulations, which required that any engine used in competition had to be installed in at least 500 street-legal production cars. Ford had a problem. Their new monstrous 7.0-liter Boss 429 V8 was ready for the track, but they didn't have a production car to house it. The solution was as crazy as it was brilliant. Force it into the Mustang. And when I say force it, I mean it literally. The Boss 429 didn't fit in the stock Mustang engine bay. Ford had to send the cars to Carcraft, an external contractor, where they completely re-engineered the car, modifying the shock towers, subframe mounts, and relocating auxiliary components, all just to make room for that massive block to breathe inside the Mustang. This was handcrafted engineering applied to a machine that didn't take no for an answer. The result was brutal, officially rated at 375 horsepower, though everyone knows the real number easily exceeded 500 horsepower. And with torque that felt limitless, the Boss 429 could hit 137 miles per hour, but beyond top speed, what impressed was how it did it. Stable, planted, and with a deep growl that vibrated through your bones. This wasn't just any Mustang. It was a street-legal missile. Aesthetically, the Boss 429 is subtle, yet aggressive. No flashy stripes or oversized wings, just a massive, bulging hood with a giant air scoop. The only visual clue that underneath that sheet metal beats one of the most fearsome engines in Ford's history. It's a wolf dressed as, well, a wolf, but one wearing a leather jacket. Today, finding one in perfect condition is every enthusiast's dream. Its current market value easily exceeds $400,000, and some examples, especially those with low mileage or impeccable history, have sold for over $600,000 at international auctions. 1970 Buick GSX. Stage 1 Buick was always known as General Motors' luxury brand. Smooth, comfortable cars designed for executives and well-off families. But in 1970, Buick looked at the muscle car scene and basically said, if we're going to play this game, we're going all in. And that's how the GSX Stage 1 was born, a muscle car disguised as a gentleman, but in reality, one of the most brutal machines of its time. Under the hood roared a colossal 7.5-liter V8, 455 cubic inches, putting out 360 horsepower. But even more impressive, a mind-blowing 510 pound-feet of torque. That's an absolutely insane number. Even by today's standards, it was so much torque, you could practically move a mountain. Thanks to this sheer brute force, the GSX Stage 1 could hit a top speed of 133 miles per hour. But what really glued you to the seat wasn't the top speed. It was the way this thing catapulted you from a standstill. It felt like being fired from a cannon. Visually, the GSX didn't leave much to the imagination about its intentions. Painted in the iconic Saturn yellow or Apollo white, combined with black stripes, a front chin spoiler, rear wing, and sporty wheels, it made one thing clear. This was no ordinary Buick. Sure, it wore a suit of luxury, but it had the attitude of a street brawler. Here's a brutal fact. When magazines of the time tested it, they discovered that the Buick GSX Stage 1 was quicker off the line than many other muscle cars with wilder reputations. In fact, many consider it to be the muscle car with the highest torque output of the golden era. Only about 678 units were produced in 1970, making it an extremely sought-after collector's item. In today's market, a pristine example can fetch anywhere between $120,000 and $200,000, and rare units with special colors and flawless documentation can go well beyond those numbers. 1970 Dodge Charger RT. If there was ever a car that represented the final great roar of the golden era of muscle cars before it all started to crumble, it was without a doubt the Dodge Charger. This wasn't just a muscle car, it was a declaration of war on wheels, a monster that screamed to the world, displacement rules, torque rules, the roar rules. The Charger had already become an icon since its debut in 1966, but by 1970, Dodge decided to give it its wildest, most extreme form, the ultimate version. And they did it by stuffing the legendary 426 Hemi 7.0-liter engine under the hood, an engine that had basically escaped from NASCAR tracks to, almost illegally, roam the streets. Officially rated at 425 horsepower, but let's be honest, everyone knew that number was marketing nonsense. In reality, it pushed well over 470 horsepower, backed by torque that could practically rip the asphalt from the ground. That combination allowed it to hit a top speed of 143 miles per hour. But the number alone wasn't what thrilled or terrified drivers. It was how it got there, with acceleration so violent that every gear shift felt like a whip crack, an explosion of brute force that slammed you back into the seat as if the car were trying to take off. Visually, the 1970 Charger RT is one of the most aggressive and seductive designs in muscle car history. Its split grille, hidden headlights, blade-like front fascia, muscular lines, and wide rear with horizontal taillights gave it an absolutely commanding presence. It was the kind of car that, even parked, looked like it was challenging you. Here's a brutal fact. The 426 Hemi engine cost nearly as much as the base car itself, and for many, paying that premium was worth every single penny, because what they were getting wasn't just a Charger, it was a beast with racing pedigree, capable of humiliating anything on the street or the track. Today, its value easily exceeds $250,000, and in some cases, perfectly restored examples, or those with rare specs, have gone for over $400,000 at auction. And now I want to hear from you. If you could choose, would you take this brutal Hemi-powered Charger as the ultimate old-school symbol? Or would you go with another muscle car on this list? Let me know in the comments. 1970 to 1971, Plymouth Cuda. This wasn't just a car. It was a warning, a street-legal threat that made it absolutely clear, both on the streets and the tracks, that it had arrived to play by its own rules. The Cuda was born from the Barracuda lineup, but when it got the HEMI treatment, it transformed. What was once a sporty pony car became a full-blown predator. Under the hood roared an engine that had already made its name on NASCAR tracks and drag strips, the legendary 426 Hemi 7.0-liter V8, with its high-compression pistons, hemispherical combustion chambers, and a design built for one thing and one thing only: to unleash mechanical hell. From the factory, it was rated at 425 horsepower, but anyone who's ever been near one knows the real number was much higher, easily pushing 470-plus horsepower with torque that felt like it could rip your soul out. Thanks to that brutality, the Cuda could hit a top speed of 143 miles per hour. But what truly made it savage wasn't just the top speed. It was how violently it launched itself down the asphalt, leaving anyone who dared challenge it in the dust. The Cuda's design is pure testosterone on wheels. That wide, aggressive body, the iconic shaker hood scoop trembling with every rev, bold side stripes, fat tires, and that muscular rear end, it looked every bit the predator it was. And it wasn't just for show. It could back up every inch of its aggressive styling. Here's a wild fact. Plymouth knew just how extreme this car was, so they actually included a clause in the sales contract that basically warned buyers, this car is designed for competition use. We are not responsible for what happens if you use it otherwise. That, right there, tells you everything you need to know. In terms of production, this is an ultra-rare gem. Only 652 units of the Cuda Hemi were built in 1970 and just 114 in 1971, making it one of the most valuable and sought-after muscle cars on the planet. Today, a perfectly preserved or fully restored Cuda Hemi can fetch over $500,000, and at auction, some examples with ultra-rare color combinations and manual transmissions have exceeded $1 million. 1970 to 1971, Dodge Challenger RT 426 Hemi. The Challenger showed up late to the muscle car party in 1970, but when Dodge decided to jump in, they brought the full heavy artillery. Their most brutal move, dropping in the legendary 426 Hemi, the same beast that had already shaken NASCAR tracks and drag strips across America, with an official rating of 425 horsepower, but in reality pushing well over 470 horsepower, and torque that could tear up the pavement and leave grown men speechless. This monster could easily hit 143 miles per hour. But more than the top speed, what really left an impression was how it delivered the power. Pure mechanical violence, insane acceleration, and a power band that felt like it had no end. The Challenger's design is simply flawless. A perfect blend of aggression, elegance, and brutal proportions. That sharp front end, massive grille, wide muscular fenders, and that iconic shaker hood scoop that trembled with every throttle punch made the car feel alive, like it was breathing, ready to devour anything in its path. And it wasn't just looks. Every part of the RT Hemi was built to handle this level of brutality. Reinforced suspension, high-performance transmission, limited slip differential, competition-grade brakes, and even structural reinforcements. This wasn't a car for just anyone. It was a machine that respected you if you knew how to tame it, but would mercilessly humble you if you dared underestimate it. Here's a brutal fact. Dodge knew the 426 Hemi was so extreme that when you bought one, it came with specific warnings about how it was intended for racing use, not your typical Sunday cruise. In fact, in many states, insurance companies outright refused to cover these cars because they were considered too dangerous. As for production numbers, 287 units of the Challenger RT with the 426 Hemi were built in 1970, and just 71 in 1971, making it an ultra-rare, high-value automotive gem. Today, an authentic, perfectly preserved example can easily exceed $500,000, and at auctions, rare configurations with impeccable history have pushed close to $1 million. 1973 to 1974, Pontiac Firebird Trans Am SD 455. As the golden era of muscle cars began to crumble, with emission laws, insurance companies, and the oil crisis threatening to silence the roar of American V8s, there was one car that refused to go quietly. One car that stared into the sunset of the muscle car era and said, "I'm not leaving without one last great fight." That car was the Firebird Trans Am, one of the last truly savage muscle cars to ever hit the streets. The story of the SD 455 is simply legendary. Pontiac knew the end was near. Emissions regulations were choking the industry, and manufacturers were slashing horsepower everywhere. But inside, Pontiac's engineering team was a group of rebels who flat out refused to give up. They took the already monstrous 455 Super Duty 7.5-liter V8, beefed it up, redesigned it from the inside out, and turned it into a competition-grade engine that was still street legal. The result was an engine officially rated at 310 horsepower, paired with savage amounts of torque that felt like it could move mountains. This brute force allowed the Trans Am SD 455 to hit a top speed of 133 miles per hour, numbers that, for a nearly 2-ton car in the middle of an emissions crisis, were absolutely insane. Visually, the Trans Am SD 455 is pure attitude. That sharp front end, twin shaker hood scoops, the iconic screaming chicken, that giant Firebird sprawled across the hood, flared fenders, and a low, aggressive stance made it a visual threat to anyone bold enough to glance twice at a stoplight. Here's something impressive. The Super Duty 455 wasn't just a hot-rodded 455. It featured reinforced blocks, forged crankshafts, heavy-duty pistons, special cylinder heads, and a race-spec oiling system designed to handle the abuse of the track. It was, in essence, a race car disguised as a street-legal muscle car. Today, its value easily exceeds $150,000, and low-mileage examples, rare color combinations, or cars with flawless documentation have crossed the $250,000 mark at auction. 1971 Chevrolet Corvette C3454 LS6. By this point in time, the Corvette was already well known for its blend of sleek styling and impressive performance. But when Chevrolet decided to drop the monstrous 454 LS 67.4-liter V8 under the hood, what they created was, without question, the most powerful Corvette of the entire 1970s. Officially rated at 425 horsepower, but as we all know, those numbers were more marketing than reality. In truth, it pushed well over 450 horsepower, backed by earth-shaking torque that turned every blast of the throttle into a physical, almost violent experience. Thanks to that insane power, this Corvette could reach a top speed of 146 miles per hour. A staggering figure for an American sports car at a time when emissions regulations and the looming oil crisis were beginning to strangle the industry. This wasn't just a fast car, it was a missile on wheels, a final scream of freedom before the chains of regulation clamped down on the automotive world. The design of the Corvette C3 remains to this day one of the most sensual and aggressive shapes ever created. Its flowing lines, pronounced curves, bulging fenders, and that endless hood with a massive bulge hinting at the monster underneath, everything about it screams speed and presence. No matter which angle you look from, the C3 LS6 looks like a panther, coiled and ready to pounce. Here's a brutal fact. The LS6 package was only available in 1971. It was so extreme that, with tightening emissions regulations, Chevrolet was forced to pull it immediately. That makes this car not just one of the most powerful Corvettes ever, but also one of the rarest and most sought after by collectors worldwide. In terms of production, only 188 units were ever built with the LS6, making it a true unicorn. In today's market, a well-preserved example can easily fetch over $250,000, with some pristine models reaching close to $400,000, depending on history, color, and configuration. And there you have it. The 10 fastest, wildest, and most brutal American cars of the 1970s. A decade that was, quite literally, the last great scream of freedom before regulations, crises, and change silenced the roar of muscle cars forever. But now, I want to know something only you can answer. If someone handed you the keys to any of these beasts, which one would you choose to dominate the road? Drop it in the comments right now, because your opinion isn't just important. It's an essential part of this community that lives and breathes the passion for classic American cars. And if you're still hungry for speed, you cannot miss the video where we cover the 10 fastest American cars of the 1960s. Trust me, if this one blew your mind, the 60s video is pure insanity on wheels. Click right here, and I'll see you there.